Hi everybody, it's Mr. Nolan, and what I would like to do with you in this video is show you how to use clay or Play-Doh to create some structures that we can use to investigate domes and basins. And even before I really talk about what domes and basins are, I want to show you a really conspicuous structure that we see in Michigan's bedrock geology. So if we look at Michigan's bedrock geology, what we find is this shape that stands out like a flashing neon sign. It's very easy to spot. It's these circles. It's these concentric rings or circular structures. I've had students describe this as a target. And it's a beautiful, beautiful pattern. It's very obvious. You'd have to be like actually blind not to see it. So it's a very obvious pattern. And what we want to be able to do is to explore how come the bedrocks of Michigan's geology adapt this bizarre pattern. It is very conspicuous, as I said. It's very easy to spot. Why do they do this? We even spot this pattern extends itself up into the Upper Peninsula, at least on the eastern half. So what's going on here? Now, these are bedrocks. Remember, this is not the soil and sediment that's sitting on top. This is, once you peel off that mantle of topsoil, this is what you get. These are the bedrocks that are exposed. They're not literally that color, but these are just different colors indicating different things. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to use a little bit of material, a little bit of Play-Doh, to model some structures, and we're going to use these structures to explore this shape that we see in the Lower Peninsula's bedrocks. Now, there's two three-dimensional structures that can result in rings on the surface. There's what's called a dome, and there's what's called a basin. A dome is kind of like an upside-down bowl. It's kind of shaped like this, and a basin is like a right-side-up bowl. It's shaped like this. I'm going to create one of each of these right here in this video with you using clay. And later, in another video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a sanding block to simulate erosion and erode the top surface of my structure away, and we're going to see what shape we end up with. Do we end up with, a shape that indicates the presence of a dome or the presence of a basin? I'm going to create one of each of these in this video right now. Okay, now to start, we need three different colors. So I have three different colors of our clay here, and I've kind of squished them into these sort of lentil shapes. Actually, I'm going to blow myself up here so we can see here. So I've got these three different colors, and rocks exist in geological layers, and the way that the age of the layers, the relative age of the layers compares is that the deeper levels are older and the more shallow levels are younger. And so I'm going to make a little sandwich of three different colors. I'm sort of going to squish them together a little bit. And what I want to do is really, I'm creating some rock layers is what I'm doing. That's what this is sort of simulating. And so I'm going to make these three little rock layers. It's going to look a little bit like a kind of a cheeseburger. Go. And I'm going to create another one that looks exactly like this, and we're going to do something a little different to each of these. And each of these different little mock-ups that we're making is a simulation of either a basin or a dome. And once we do some things to these, we can really understand how come we see this really weird, whoops, not what I wanted. How come we see this really strange circular pattern here in Michigan's bedrocks? Okay, so I've gone ahead and I have created two identical little cheeseburgers with our layers. The important thing, in order for this to work, it doesn't matter what colors you have. What matters is the order of the colors. So this is correct. This would be wrong. Okay, we wouldn't want the green and the red to be in different places. We want to make sure that these are the same. Now remember, these are simulating layers of rock, and rock have thickness, right? Layers of rock have thickness. So what you wouldn't want to do is smush this flat like a piece of paper. You wouldn't want to do that. We want it to have some thickness. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a basin with one and then a dome with another. And then later, what we're going to do is we're going to sandpaper off the top and erode the layers away and see what that ends up with. How does our structure look? And can we use that to figure out whether Michigan has a basin or a dome underneath in those bedrocks? So just for the sake of well, this is arbitrary, but I'm just going to put the red on top, and what we're going to do for this first one, we're going to make a dome. And so to make a dome, what I'm going to do, I've got my cheeseburger, and I'm sort of going to squash the top part down, And this is going to create our dome. Now, as I do that, I'm using my thumbs to kind of press the green part in a little bit, kind of pinch that in. What I don't want to do is to use my thumbs and press a hole in it. What we just want is we want to bend this top layer over the rest of it, while at the same time not pushing our thumbs through. So your fingers are on the edge. This is really where we want our fingers. We don't want the fingers to be pressing up through the middle. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bend this outer layer down, or the top layer, right? I'm trying to bend that down. And at the same time, I'm trying to keep the bottom from getting pushed in. And so I want to kind of keep the bottom flat. You can even take a flat, either piece of scrap paper. You can tell it's got colors sort of smeared all over it. But I'm going to take my piece of scrap paper and I'm sort of going to rotate this on it, just so that I get kind of a nice flat structure on the bottom. Nice kind of rounded. Okay, that's pretty good. And so what I've just created here, this is called a dome. Now, we have not eroded our dome, so if you look at it, if we're looking top down on it like this, we don't see any circles or anything like that. And that's because this very top layer is kind of shielding all the rest, so we can't really see what's going on underneath. But if we do kind of take a glance underneath, look, we can see that we've got our green layer, we've got our yellow layer kind of sandwiched in between, and then we have our red layer sort of domed out on top. All of the layers are the same dome shape, right? We can't see all of them underneath, but they're all the same dome shape. So I'm going to set this aside. In this case, this stuff can dry. So the recipe that's down in the information section of the video, this stuff will actually dry. It cracks, though, as it dries. Don't worry, that's not going to really hurt anything. Now, I'm going to create now a basin. This is a dome, right? I'm going to create a basin with the layers ordered the same. So I need the red on top. But a basin works different from a dome. In a basin, what happens is that we're actually going to bend the lower levels up, right? So this is called, I mean, I guess I would call this upwarping of the sides. These sides are actually bending up. Now, temporarily, if we need to, we can turn this over just so that we have a little bit more control over it. But I'm just kind of going to temporarily turn this over just so that I can get this nice and sort of pinched in there. And again, what I'm doing is I'm trying to warp this layer while sort of pulling the others in a little bit. There's a little bit of an art to this. It doesn't matter too much if it's not perfect, but we don't want to press our thumb in there. We don't want to make a hole. We kind of want to keep it flat. This looks like a turtle. A little turtle shell. Now remember, right now this is upside down, right? This isn't ultimately how we want our basin to look. Our basin is actually sort of shaped like a bowl. Well, this bowl is upside down, so this would not be right. So I'm also going to take my paper here. I'm just sort of going to rotate this on it, give it a little spin. I can't really see that. There we go. Give it a little spin so that the bottom stays kind of flat. Notice there's not a big hole in there. I'm kind of trying to keep the bottom as flat as I can. Or the top, I should say. Okay. It's probably good enough. It's not perfect. I can goof around with it a little bit more later. I want to show you what I got here. What I have, let me tilt this down here. Okay. What I have right here, I've got a basin over here on this side, and then I have a dome right here. And it's important to recognize that with my dome over here, the layers are in the same order as they are with my basin. It's just that the shape of the layers is bent differently. In both cases, no matter which one you're looking at, the layer that's on top, the layer that's the most near the surface is the red one. Either one, right? The red one is the one that we would say is the layer that's nearest the surface. And in both cases, the green is deepest. The green is the layer that's the deepest. Now, this is actually really important because the location of the layer and how deep it is relative to the others indicates to us its relative age. So layers that are very deep are older. Layers that are shallow are younger. So in this case, in both of these cases, the youngest rock is on the top. It's the red one, right? The red stuff is the young rock. The rock toward the bottom, the green stuff, is older. That's why we color them in a really specific pattern, we kept the pattern identical so that the layering of the rocks is the same. The only thing that changed is the shape. So here's what we're going to do after these dry. We're not going to do it in the span of this video, but we'll do it at another time. After these dry, I'm going to take a sanding block. I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper, and I'm going to take my dome and basin oriented like this, and I'm going to rub away, and so erosion is going to erode into the rocks of my dome and into my basin. And once I've eroded them away so that both surfaces are nice and flat, we'll be able to get a really good look at how those rocks peek through, and what structure do we get. Do we get a structure in which the younger rocks are in the middle and they get older as they go out, or do we get a structure in which the rocks are older in the middle and they get younger as they go out? That pattern is going to be instrumental in being able to tell what kind of geology are we seeing in the rocks below. Do we see a basin or a dome? There's all kinds of other structures that we can explore. We can look at, geosynclines and anticlines. We can look at tilting and all kinds of interesting geological features. This one's kind of nice and simple because we have a beautiful example of one of these in Michigan. We'll have to figure out whether it's a basin or a dome, but once these dry and we erode into them, we can actually kind of figure out which of these makes a better shape of Michigan. We also have to know how the rocks in Michigan differ as you go from the middle to the edge. Do they get younger as you move from the middle to the edge, or do they get older? That's going to tell us whether it's a basin or a dome. So I'm going to let these dry, and then I will erode them away with my sandpaper, and then hopefully I will post another video in the future that shows me doing that, and shows what structures we get as a result of erosion on these processes. So even though we didn't actually do the erosion part because we have to let these dry, I hope that this kind of gives you an idea about what kinds of structures can result in this circular pattern that we see in Michigan. It could either be a basin or a dome, but we're going to have to do a little bit of sanding later on to be able to see how would erosion influence both of these shapes, and see which of those makes more sense for producing this bullseye circular structure that we see in Michigan's Lower Peninsula.